everyone. We're going to be talking about harnessing the power of classes today. Let's go ahead and get started on the power of classes with the basics. We're going to talk about what are classes and their purpose. So, in short, classes in QuickBooks are a feature. It allows you to categorize transactions and reports on them, separately from your regular financial statements. It gives you that extra level of organization. They can represent departments, locations, product lines, or any other meaningful division that you may need. The purpose is to track the different segments. Again, along those same kind of lines, departments, locations, whatever they may be. This is going to allow for better organization and better analysis of like your income expenses, especially if you're talking with like multiple revenue streams or cost centers. Very, very helpful. That allows you to gain better insights. It simplifies the process because now we're going to be able to do your reports on just specific segments, which also improves accuracy and detail. All good things. So just a couple examples just for illustration, make sure everybody understands. Let's say you're in a retail business. That retail business can use classes to track sales and expenses for each of its store locations. So rather than trying to put it all into one report, now you can break it out into different segments. Another example might be a consulting firm that would use classes to differentiate between different types of services offered. Maybe it is a contractor or a builder who delineates between like commercial and residential. Just some examples. There's lots of them, and we'll actually talk about a few of them later on this webinar. It is important, I do want to mention, it is important to really carefully plan it out because this will affect your books. So you want to carefully plan it out and set them up to make sure that they align with your business structure and your reporting needs, okay? Giving that some forethought and some planning and not just kind of willy-nilly putting it in there is important. The downside of it is that, well, this is really for anything, but in order for it to be effective, it needs to be implemented consistently across the board. So everybody's got to be using it. Otherwise, the data is not very helpful. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so for understanding purposes, giving you an example here. So instead of using, a lot of people do it in their chart of accounts. This is something that we will see frequently. So instead, in this example of like using ophthalmology services, optometry services, surgical services, and then doing the same for products, and then I could continue this list. It'd be like cost of goods sold, right? Ophthalmology, you know, optometry cost of goods sold. You can kind of, I hope, get the gist of what I'm going with here. It's almost like you would look at a chart of accounts and see the same chart of accounts multiplied by whatever divisions, okay? This is an excellent opportunity to use classes instead. That would simplify your chart of accounts, provide better reporting, better organization. That's a clear sign that someone needs to look at implementing classes if you start seeing the same accounts being repeated with different delineators. So let's take you a couple steps here just to get you up there so you know how to do it. It's pretty simple. We're going to start with going to List at the top of your screen using that tab. Once you select that, you'll see an option for Class List. That would be the next thing you select. And then you will, once that comes up, you'll see a list of any classes that have been previously made. Sometimes QuickBooks has some default classes already there. And at the bottom, you will see an option for New, a class at the bottom, and then you select New. And then you will see a box come up similar to this, which will allow you to go ahead and put the class in. So you go ahead and make the name. And it even lets you go ahead and hit next. So you can just keep putting in a list of class names. You can do this very quickly. I do want to mention that you can choose to use a subclass, which would help in a little bit deeper level of organization. So you can choose to use subclasses as well. We'll address that here shortly. So pretty easy to create that list. Well, one thing I didn't mention, and I should have mentioned that last slide, is you will need to turn the class list preference on. So you'll go to Edit and Accounting and make sure it's turned on there. And you'd see this box right here where it shows class. So in this case, we've checked use class tracking for transactions. You do need to make sure that that is turned on. In this example, note that it says prompt to assign classes and assign classes to, and you have a selection. The prompt to assign classes is a helpful checkbox to enable, because that will cause you to be reminded to fill in a class if you haven't done so as you're filling in transactions. That will help with the consistency piece of this. And you can assign classes to different segments. You can do accounts, items, and I believe customers. Okay, so with that, I'll back up here a little bit here. So best practices. Align the specific segments of the business that you want to track separately. So you want them consistent, you want everything aligned. Again, thinking out the goal of your business structure and how you want reports to show, right? Kind of keeping that in the back of your mind, you can kind of figure out what might be best for your classes. Consider using a hierarchical structure. That is where you're using those subclasses underneath a class. Use consistent naming, right? Just being organized and consistent. So in this example, I've demonstrated how you might use this in that hierarchical structure with subclasses. So we've used a location. So in this case, we're looking at Austin location. Think of this like a retail store, and underneath it, we've got some subclasses for the women's department, men's department, children's department, and then you could do the same thing for a Dallas location, right? You can have as many locations as you need, and you can have as many departments. So this is a way to kind of use those subclasses to organize a little bit deeper. Keeping in mind that each one of these can generate its own report. Another example, like builder, for example, might be to commercial and residential as two different classes, and then each class being subdivided by the type of work. So let's say framing, HVAC, remodel, that kind of thing. Again, we're thinking about what we want to track in terms of your reports. What's going to be helpful for you to be able to see, like a profit and loss, for example, by itself. Would you like to see all your remodel business, right? And how it breaks out as far as your income and your expenses. Do you want to see it by department, by location? Those are the things to ask. Okay. So how do we assign them? One thing that's important to understand is with classes, you can assign it either to the transaction itself or to the individual line items. So it gives you some different options. Excuse me. And you can see that in these examples. So up here to the top left, we've got the invoice. You can select your class. You can see it in the checks. You can select the class right there or in your categories. Bills will give you the same option. Journal entries, same thing. So any entry transaction is going to have the class showing. And it is a drop-down menu. So whatever classes you happen to set up, and that class list that we just talked about is what is going to show here for you to select, which is actually very important. Otherwise, you have people putting in wrong names. So this is going to help you. But I think possibly you may also see that it does require a little bit of extra diligence on the front end. To make this useful, you do need to have a consistent process to assign your class. If you don't, what ends up happening is the transaction shows up in uncategorized, like an undefined class, and that isn't going to help you when you're running your reports. You're going to be missing data in one of your other classes. So that's the important takeaway from this. Okay. So what do you do with them? Biggest thing is to use them to generate reports. Now, I'll talk about customizing here in just a moment. Some of the basic ones that you're going to see are going to be like profit and loss by class, which is an excellent report, very useful. As you can see in this example, these were the classes, the new construction, remodel, and overhead were the classes that were set up. Notice right to the right of it where it says unclassified. That means that if something populated there, it would indicate that a class was not assigned to that transaction. And if I were to see this on a profit and loss, I would be going back in and reclass and adding in that class so that everything is where it should be. This is, I hope you could see, it would be a very helpful report, which would show you your full profit and loss by class. Same way with the balance sheet by class. So you can segment on the balance sheet as well. Other ones might be transaction detail by class. So you can have a list of all your transactions by that. Sales by class. There's a lot of different ones in here. And even more important is you can customize the report and filter it to show you a specific class. So let's say you have just a generic report. In this case, I've just pulled out a transaction list by date report. You can use this same report to differentiate by classes. A lot of QuickBooks reports will have that class as an option to filter. Not every one. It's going to be dependent on the report, but a lot of them do. So feel free to check them out and see what you can do. So how do you use the custom feature to get you what you need? First step, in the upper left, you'll see you're going to add the column because you want to see the data. So in this case, I just started typing class, it popped up, and I made sure that the check mark was there next to class. That means that that column is going to show up in a report. Then the next step is to go to the next tab, which is filters. So under filters, what we're looking for is class. So we're going to select the class filter. When you highlight that, it's going to show you your options right next to it. In this case, we selected new construction from the down arrow. You can select multiple classes if you want. So that might be helpful. Maybe you do have some subclasses. So maybe we want different subclasses showing as well. But you select exactly what you want to filter for. And that is it. You go ahead and run the report. And you will see, like you see in the bottom piece here, that we have transactions showing only for the class new construction. So very helpful, right? You could use this for so many different reports. All right, let's take a moment and kind of talk through different options or different case scenarios of when you might use this. The most frequent one we see is going to be your different departments or divisions. So you have a business, right, with different departments. You can segment by that. Different locations, like I showed you in that previous example with Austin and Dallas, and then having different departments underneath that. But it could just be locations if that's what it is. So you have 10 different locations around the US. You can have a class for each one. And then you can have reports basically delineating between each location. Extremely helpful tool to have. Product lines or services. So that might come into like the residential, commercial example that we talked about. Maybe you do some consulting work, but you also do some installation. Whatever it happens to be that you are doing, however that income is generated for the business, ask yourself, are there any groupings that would be very helpful to break out for reporting purposes? Projects or jobs, you can use this for specific projects so that you have that P&L for your project. Funding sources, grants, like restricted funds is one that I see a lot. You have restricted funds for a specific project, right? You can only use these funds to build a school, right? Or for teacher assistance, or whatever it might be, or a specific ministry. You could set up the classes to identify them. That's very powerful, especially in those cases, because then at the end of the day, you can run that report and know how much was collected in that fund versus how much has been distributed. Cost centers, same thing, same idea there. Events or campaigns. How much money did this campaign generate versus how much came out of it, right? If you're running different fundraising events, that could be helpful to know. Tax categories or jurisdictions. Excuse me. I have seen this work for builders who need to identify the different different localities that they did the work for reporting on taxes. That was one way that we did it. Customer segmentation. That could be like residential or commercial. It could be one area of town versus another. You know, it could be locational. It could be, honestly, if you really wanted to track like referrals, you could even set it up that way. Tracking, this is all the work that came in from this particular business or referral versus another one. Let's say you have a big contracts, right? The city of Knoxville gave us this contract. We have all this work. The county of Knoxville gave us this work. You know, city of Sevierville gave us this work. You could segment it that way, again, to be able to pull those reports with that specificity and detail in it. Properties. If you have property management firms, will use classes to segment their properties, right? So 123 Main Street, right? 245 Main Street, whatever it happens to be. Now you can track your income in and the expenses going out. There's a ton of uses for it. It just need to stay open and kind of think about it. And also whether you need to use multiple layers in it. Very helpful. Okay, so let me go ahead and touch base on some advanced tips and tricks. Already said this because I like to use them. Use the subclasses and parent classes. if need be, right? If the case justifies that. Keep everything updated. Keep your list updated regularly. Don't keep a lot of old classes. Let's say you're no longer handling residential work, then don't use it as a class, right? Go ahead and edit it and make it inactive so it doesn't show up on the drop-down list anymore. Keep everything up to date. You can, last week we talked about budgets. You can set up a budget by class. So instead of, if you think of like doing a generic or a general budget for a company, you could set it up for the women's department. You could set it up for the residential division. You could set it up for the Austin location. So think in terms of being able to even use the budgets that way. And this last thing I've noted here is a fantastic tool that I hope everyone knows about. If you are an accountant user, you will find it under accountant, and it'll be like client data tools. Otherwise, you can look under company towards near the end. You should see something like accountant tools. And if you hover over it, you will see a bunch of different tools pop up. One of the first tools you're going to see is the reclassify tool. I love this tool. I use it all the time. But it is very helpful with classes especially. So think in terms of, okay, this is March. Let's say you all got really excited about this presentation, you know, because it was just so awesome and gave you so many good ideas on how you can set up your business. But what about all the transactions that came in before today? Do we have to go through each and every one, open every single transaction and add in the class? No, you don't. You can use the reclassify tool. All you need to do is open it up and you will see, in this case, we have selected expense accounts. You'll also see an option for balance sheet accounts and profit and loss accounts. As you select each of these accounts, all the transactions, all the historical transactions that have already been put in here show up, okay? And notice you can change the date filter. So we only wanted it in that case. Let's say we only want it for this year. You can just put in January through current date. So all those transactions are going to show up. Then what you can do is you can select all. So let's say everything here in repairs, it was all part of our repair department. Well, you could select all of those boxes. There's a select all button. And then you choose what class you want it to go to. So at the very bottom, it's faint, but it's there. You just type in or click the down arrow and classes will show up. And then you select your class, and then you select reclassify. And then all of those transactions that you just checkboxed will now have that class added to it, okay? Super easy tool to use. If you need to clean it up or go through and make sure everything's classed correctly, see what's been missed, you have stuff sitting in that uncategorized, easy tool to use to fix that. Okay. Also recommend getting some training and support in this. If you need some help, you want to kind of think through how it might look or how you want your reports to show, reach out. We can certainly help with that. Always getting educated is going to help you. Okay, so with that, it kind of concludes our topic for today. I hope you guys got a lot out of that. I hope you'll start thinking about ways that you can reorganize your QuickBooks file to give you better reports and better information, greater success. Every week we do these webinars. The next one coming up will be on custom fields, following templates, and user roles. I hope to see you all there. If you have any questions, please go ahead and post it, and we will follow back up with you.